I was stranded in the Australian Outback. Something hunted me. By Page Turner 627. The morning sun is just beginning to crest the horizon, casting a soft, golden glow over Karijini National Park. I feel a mix of excitement and apprehension as I load my Land Cruiser for my first solo patrol. I check my gear one last time. Radio, check. Map, check. Water and supplies, all accounted for. I climb into the driver's seat and start the engine, the sound breaking the morning stillness. This park, with its rugged terrain and untamed beauty, is now my responsibility. The Australian outback stretches out before me, vast and unyielding. I can't help but think about how far I've come to be here. With a sense of nostalgia, I reach into the glove compartment and pull out a weathered, leather-bound notebook. Flipping it open, I'm greeted by a collage of notes, sketches, and photographs. More than half of the photos feature me and my father in various outdoor settings, snapshots of our shared adventures. My parents divorced when I was just a kid, so my life was split between their two worlds. Growing up, I spent the weekends with my mum in the stifling urban sprawl of Perth. But the weekends were my escape. My dad would come whisk me away to a different reality. Would go exploring the national parks all across Western Australia, hiking through dense bushland and camping under starlit skies. The trips were a much-needed escape from the confines of city life and the constant tension between me and Mum's new boyfriend, Mark, a prick who could never seem to hide his disdain for me. The feeling was mutual. As I flip through the images, I see myself growing up, from a curious child in awe of the natural world to a teenager more confident and assured, always by my dad's side. One particular photo catches my eye. It's of me, about 9 or 10 years old, around the time of the divorce. I'm standing with Dad by a serene lake, our smiles as wide as the horizon behind us. We're proudly holding up a fish we caught together. I gently turn the photo over. There, in my dad's familiar, slanted handwriting, is a message that strikes a chord in my heart. The wilderness is where you'll find yourself. The last photo in the collection, taken the weekend of my 15th birthday, is one I rarely look at, but today I feel compelled to. We're sitting on a rocky outcrop, our faces turned towards the setting sun. Dad's arm is around my shoulders, and I'm leaning into him, a half smile on my face. But it's his expression that catches my eye. There's a shadow that hangs over him. He was a man haunted by demons that he never spoke with me about, and that I was always too afraid to ever ask. Despite the darkness that seemed to cling to him, my love for him was unwavering. His complexities, in a way, made me love him more. He was my rock, my constant in a sea of change. In my heart of hearts, I had convinced myself that it would always be the two of us, father and daughter, side by side, against the world. The crackle of the radio startles me out of my reverie. The voice of my supervisor's familiar, gruff voice fills the cabin.
Arnhem, do you read me?
I picked up the radio and pressed the button, my voice steady but with an undercurrent of anticipation. This is Ranger Arnhem, reading you loud and clear. What's the good word, Big Mike?
Just checking in to see if you're all set for your solo excursion.
Big Mike replies. Yeah, all good here. Just about to head out. I smile, appreciating his concern.
Remember, kiddo, this park's a wild place. Keep your wits about you and don't take unnecessary risks,
he advises. Absolutely. I promise I won't do anything you wouldn't, I reply, with a playful tone that elicits a chuckle on the other end.
Good. That's what I like to hear. And hey, Willow,
he adds, a hint of warmth breaking through his usually stoic demeanour.
Your old man would be proud of you. You've got this.
A lump forms in my throat at his words. In a lot of ways, becoming a park ranger was my attempts to stay connected with my dad in the only way I knew how. Thanks, BM. I'll report back by late afternoon. Arnhem out, I say, signing off. As I navigate the rugged tracks winding through the park, the sun climbs higher, casting sharp shadows across the red earth. The landscape is breathtaking, with gorges slicing through the terrain and ancient rock formations standing as silent witnesses to time. Several uneventful hours into my patrol, the landscape unfolds into a familiar rhythm: red earth, towering gorges, and the occasional wildlife. It's a typical day in the Karijini, tranquil yet alive with the whispers of nature. However, as I approach the remote area near Wino Gorge, something catches my eye. It's a subtle disturbance, a flicker of movement or a shade out of place, hard to discern at first, but unmistakably unusual. Wino Gorge, while known for its breathtaking views, is rarely visited, its beauty guarded by the ruggedness of its terrain. It could be anything: a lost hiker, a rare animal sighting, or perhaps just a trick of light and shadow. But as a park ranger in this unforgiving expanse, every possibility warrants attention. Curiosity piqued, I decide to take a detour to investigate. The stillness is shattered by the ominous rumble of shifting earth. My eyes dart upwards, catching sight of a massive boulder breaking free from the cliff above. Time seems to slow as I watch it tumble, gaining momentum, its path unmistakably aimed at my Land Cruiser. My heart pounds in my chest, a primal instinct to survive kicking in. Gripping the steering wheel, I swerve the vehicle with all the might I can muster. The landscape blurs as I make a desperate attempt to evade the impending collision. But the boulder, like a relentless predator, seems to follow my every move. The distance between us rapidly closes. With a final, futile twist of the wheel, I brace for impact. The world erupts into chaos. The deafening crush of metal against stone reverberates through the air. The 4x4 lurches violently, throwing me against my seatbelt as the world outside spins in a dizzying whirl of red dust and shattered glass. The airbags deploy with a force that feels like a punch to my chest and face, their rapid inflation cushioning the brutal impact. For a moment, everything is white and suffocating, the smell of propellant strong in my nostrils. My ears ring from the loud pop of the airbags and the thunderous crash of the boulder. Pain sears through my body as the vehicle comes to a jarring halt, tossed aside like a toy in the wake of the boulder's destructive path. I struggle to catch my breath, the air thick with dust and the acrid scent of burning rubber. I groan, a deep-seated pain throbbing in my head. My hand instinctively goes to my forehead, feeling the wetness of blood seeping through my fingers. Bloody hell, I mutter under my breath, the words barely audible over the ringing in my ears. I try to orient myself amidst the wreckage. The vehicle is crumpled, its frame twisted in an unnatural contortion. My head throbs and my vision swims, but the urgency of the situation propels me forward. I quickly check myself for injuries. Apart from a throbbing pain in my head and a few bruises, I seem okay. The car, however, is another story. It's totaled, a twisted mass of metal and shattered glass, with smoke billowing from the hood. I fumble for the radio, my hands shaking. "Base, this is Ranger Arnhem," I croak, hoping the radio survived the crash. Static crackles in response, a sign that communication might still be possible. "I've been in an accident near Wino Gorge. Need immediate assistance." The radio remains silent, leaving me with a sinking feeling of isolation. Panic rises in my chest. I'm tens of kilometers away from the nearest ranger station, in a rarely patrolled part of the park. My water supply is limited, and with the harsh sun climbing higher, the heat becomes suffocating. The old fear, that gnawing sense of abandonment, starts creeping back, threatening to paralyze me. It's a ghost I thought I'd left behind, but here, in the vastness of the Outback, it looms large once more. But I fight against the rising tide of panic. I close my eyes, take a deep breath, and focus on what I can control. "You can do this, Willow," I say to myself through clenched teeth. I recall the survival training I underwent as part of my Ranger induction, the countless hours of first aid, navigation, and emergency response drills. With a grimace, I try to push the car door open. It creaks and resists, a reminder of the force of the crash. As I exert more pressure, a sharp pain shoots through my arm, causing me to wince. Carefully, I assess my wrist. It's swollen and tender. I suspect it's sprained, maybe even fractured. I awkwardly maneuver out of the driver's seat, grabbing the first aid kit as I do so. Sitting on the ground, I lean against the vehicle, trying to steady my breathing. I give myself a more thorough examination, checking for other injuries I might have missed in the initial shock. The throbbing in my head is intense, and I feel a warm trickle of blood down my temple, maybe a concussion. There's a deep cut on my leg from the collision. It's bleeding, but not profusely. I clean the wound as best I can with the limited supplies in the kit and bandage them tightly. The pain in my wrist is persistent, but I manage to wrap it in a makeshift splint. As I sit there, gathering my thoughts, I remember passing a waterfall a few kilometers away on my patrol route. The thought of its shade and fresh water gives me a sliver of hope in this dire situation. I know I need to get there if I want to increase my chances of survival. Gathering my wits, I turn my attention to the GPS mounted on the dashboard, hoping for a glimmer of guidance, but my heart sinks as I find it damaged beyond use, its screen a spiderweb of cracks, lifeless and unresponsive. I turn to the glove compartment, rummaging through its contents until my fingers find the familiar, slightly worn edges of a map. Laying it flat on the hood of the damaged vehicle, I try to pinpoint my current location. Using landmarks I remember passing, like the distinctive shape of a nearby gorge and the direction I was heading, I estimate my position. It's not exact, but it should be close enough. I trace the contours and landmarks with my fingers. The waterfall is marked clearly, a blue squiggle amidst a sea of brown and greens. I plot my course, mentally calculating the distance and the direction I need to head. The sun, now a fiery orb in the sky, will be my guide. I need to head east, towards the rising sun, then veer slightly north. Gathering my strength, I stand up, wincing at the sharp pain in my leg and wrists. I grab my backpack and fill it with supplies from the car, water canteens, emergency rations, a small survival kit, and most importantly my notebook. It's not much, but it's something. I put on a pair of sunglasses and a hat to shield myself from the relentless sun. I scour the area around the wreck, searching for anything that could serve as a makeshift walking stick. After a few minutes of searching, I find a sturdy, fallen branch. It's not perfect, but it's solid enough to support my weight and help me maintain my balance. The trek is grueling, each step a test of endurance. My sprained wrist throbs with every movement, and the cut on my leg stings sharply, but I push through the pain. The rugged terrain is unforgiving, with rocky outcrops and uneven ground making the journey more challenging. As I walk, I can't help but think of my dad. The stories he told me of his adventures in the wild, the tips he gave me for surviving in harsh conditions, they all come flooding back. I realize now how much those weekend excursions with him were not just about bonding, but also about preparing me for moments like this. Every few hundred meters, I come to a stop, taking sips from my canteen, rationing the precious water to make it last as long as possible. The sun relentlessly beats down on me, causing sweat to pour from my brow and evaporate instantly in the arid air. Each pause is also an opportunity to check the compass from my survival kit to ensure that I'm still heading in the right direction. As I trudge on, a nagging sensation begins to gnaw at the edges of my consciousness. It's a feeling of being watched, a prickling at the back of my neck that I can't quite shake off. At first, I dismiss it as the jitters, but the feeling persists. I catch fleeting glimpses of shadows moving at the edge of my vision, too quick to be just tricks of light. Every rustle of the underbrush, every snap of a twig, sends a shiver down my spine. It's as if the landscape itself is watching me, a silent stalker, just out of sight. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, I reach the waterfall. The sound of cascading water is a welcome relief. The shade provided by the surrounding trees offers a respite from the searing sun. I collapse near the water's edge. I crawl towards the water, the sound of it a soothing balm to my frazzled nerves. I carefully unscrew the cap of my canteen and dip it into the clear, cool water, filling it to the brim. The water is pristine, a lifeline in the unforgiving environment. I take a cautious sip, letting the liquid refresh my parched throat. The heat is relentless, and my body aches for relief. With a deep breath, I began to strip off my dusty, sweat-soaked clothes. Each movement is a challenge with my injuries, but the thought of the cool water on my skin spurs me on. I leave my clothes in a neat pile on the rocks and step gingerly into the water. The shock of the coolness is immediate, sending shivers through my overheated body. I wade deeper, submerging myself up to my shoulders. The water soothes my aching muscles and the sting of my injuries. I immerse my head, letting the water flow over me, washing away the dust and fear that clung to me since the crash. Floating there, I close my eyes and let the water cradle me, a temporary escape from the pressing reality of my situation. But there's no time to linger. I have to be practical, to think about survival. I emerge from the water and dress. I redo my bandaging, making sure they're secure. While I sit there, drying off in the sun, I start to formulate a plan. I know they'll send out a search party once I don't report back, but with the vastness of the park, it could be a while before they find me. I need to make myself as visible as possible. As the sun begins its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I find a suitable spot near the waterfall to set up a temporary camp. I clear the ground of debris and lay down a layer of leaves and branches to sit on. Gathering stones, I create a small circle for a fire, ensuring it is far enough away from the trees and brush to prevent any risk of a wildfire. The process of starting a fire is arduous, especially with my injured wrist, but I persevere. Using a lighter from my survival kit, I finally manage to spark a flame. I feed the fire with small twigs and branches, watching as the flames grow stronger. As the temperature drops rapidly, I wrap myself in a thermal blanket, huddling close to the fire's comforting glow. Underneath the star-studded sky, I can't help but feel a sense of vulnerability. The vastness of the wilderness and the isolation it brings are both awe-inspiring and terrifying, yet the fire serves as a beacon of hope, a signal to any rescue aircraft that may be scouring the park for me. As night falls, the sounds of the outback become more pronounced. The distant calls of nocturnal animals, the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze, and the continuous murmur of the waterfall create a sympathy of wilderness. I take out my notebook and a pen from my backpack and start to write. I jot down my location, the details of the accident, and my current situation. I note the direction I walked from the crash site and any landmarks I passed and cross-reference them on my map. After a while, I set aside the notebook and focus on staying warm and alert. I periodically add wood to the fire, ensuring it keeps burning throughout the night. I wrap myself in my thoughts, the crackling of the fire a soothing backdrop, when suddenly a rustling sound cuts through the silence. It's coming from the dense brush just beyond the firelight's reach. I tense up, every muscle in my body on high alert. You've no doubt seen all those memes about how Australian wildlife is out to murder you. While mostly gross exaggerations, there's always a kernel of truth in them. The outback is home to some of the most unique and, yes, potentially dangerous creatures in the world. My mind races through the possibilities. Could it be a snake? A dingo, perhaps? Or something larger? The rustling grows louder, more insistent. Then, out of the darkness, a figure emerges. For a moment, my heart leaps into my throat. But it's not a predator. It's a joey, a young kangaroo, a male by the looks of it. His eyes wide with curiosity as he cautiously approaches the firelight. He's far too small to have caused the earlier disturbance in the brush. "Hey there, mate," I murmur, trying to keep my voice steady despite the unease churning in my gut. "You're all right. I'm not going to hurt you. Where's your mum?" The kangaroo cocks his head slightly, as if considering my words, then takes a tentative step closer. In that moment, there's a sense of connection, a fleeting bond formed in the wilderness. But the serenity shatters in an instant. The ground beneath me starts trembling, sending ripples through the water, a subtle vibration at first that quickly escalates into a violent shudder. The joey, sensing the danger before I fully grasp it, bolts into the darkness, his powerful legs carrying him swiftly away. For a moment, I'm frozen, my mind struggling to make sense of the sudden shift in the peaceful night. "Wait!" I call out instinctively, though I know the kangaroo is far beyond hearing me. Pushing aside my blanket, I scramble to my feet, my pain momentarily forgotten in the adrenaline rush. I grab my torch and stumble forward, trying to follow the kangaroo, driven by an inexplicable urge to not be alone in this unsettling moment. Suddenly, the earth in front of me ruptures with a violence that knocks me off my feet. I scramble backwards, my heart pounding in my chest. From the fissure in the ground, a nightmarish creature emerges, its form so bizarre and terrifying that my mind struggles to comprehend it. The skin is a grotesque tapestry of oozing, putrid green, brown and grey, resembling a patchwork of rot and decay. Slimy tendrils hang from its grotesque, bloated body, swaying with a perverse rhythm. The eyes, glowing a malevolent red, are sunken into its face, framed by sickly, translucent membranes that blink horizontally like the slit pupils of a snake. Frozen in terror, I can only stare as the creature opens its gaping maw, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. A low, guttural growl emanates from its throat, vibrating through the air and draining the blood from my face. Instinct kicks in, and I know I have to move. I stumble backwards, my injured leg protesting with sharp jabs of pain. The creature lunges forward, its movements surprisingly swift for its size. I dodge to the side, barely avoiding its snapping jaws. I scramble back to the fire, my breath ragged with fear and exertion. The creature is relentless, its every movement filled with predatory purpose. In a desperate bid for defense, I grab a flaming branch from the fire, the embers scattering in a shower of sparks. With every ounce of strength I have, I swing the branch at the monster. The flames lick at its grotesque skin, and it recoils with a hideous screech that pierces the night air. The smell of burning flesh and singed hair fills my nostril, a nauseating reminder of the surreal danger I'm facing. I don't stop to think. I swing the branch again and again, each strike a desperate plea for survival. The monster, though visibly pained by the flames, is undeterred. It snarls and lunges at me with renewed ferocity, its claws swiping through the air, inches from my face. I retreat, circling the fire, using it as a barrier between myself and this nightmarish foe. I grab my bag, pivot on my heel, and sprint towards the waterfall, the only refuge I can think of. The creature follows, its guttural roars echoing off the rocky walls. My heart pounds in my ears, drowning out all other sounds except the monster's relentless pursuit. I don't dare look back, focusing only on the path ahead. Reaching the waterfall, I scan the area frantically for any crevice or overhang to hide in. The mist from the fall is thick, shrouding the area in a damp, eerie veil. I can hear the creature's heavy footfalls drawing nearer, the sound growing louder with each passing second. My heart hammers against my ribcage, threatening to burst. In a split-second decision, I dart towards a small overhang near the base of the waterfall. It's a gamble, but it's the only chance I have. The ground is slippery, treacherous, and I struggle to maintain my balance as I move. Just as I reach the overhang, a terrifying realization hits me. It's a dead end. The rocky wall looms high, offering no escape. I feel utterly cornered, trapped. The creature's growls are now just meters away, its menacing presence looming over me. Panic grips me, the fear so intense it's almost paralyzing. My mind races through every possible scenario, but none offer a way out. I brace myself, ready to face the creature, when suddenly a pair of strong, calloused hands grab me from behind, covering my mouth. My initial impulse is to struggle, to fight against this new threat, but the hands are insistent, pulling me towards the cascading waterfall. I plunge into the veil of water, a cold, blinding torrent that disorientates me further. Is this another threat, or an unexpected ally? As I'm pulled through the cascading waterfall, the cool water envelops me, sending shockwaves through my already exhausted body. The sensation is disorienting, like being caught in a relentless storm. I can hardly see or breathe, but the strong grip on my arms guides me steadily through the torrent. We emerge into a narrow, cramped crevice, hiding behind the waterfall. The space is barely large enough for two people, and I'm pressed close to the stranger in the confined area. The sound of the fall roars just outside, muffling any other noise. The stranger, still gripping my arms, finally releases me and spins me around to face him. I find myself face to face with a young Aboriginal man. His features are strong, weathered by the elements. His eyes are alert, his expression serious, but not unkind. He's dressed like a traditional hunter-gatherer, reminiscent of the figures I've seen in history textbooks. His skin is painted with intricate designs, symbols that speak of a deep connection to the land and its lore. He's armed with traditional weapons, including a spear and a boomerang, hanging from a belt made of woven plant fibers. He seems like a man out of time. For a moment, we just stare at each other, both catching our breath. He gestures to me to stay silent, his finger to his lips. The young man, his movements swift and deliberate, reaches into a small leather pouch at his side. He pulls out a handful of fine, ochre-coloured powder. Without a word, he spits into the powder, mixing it with practiced ease. He starts smearing the gritty paste over my face, hair and clothes. His hands are gentle yet efficient, covering every bit of exposed skin. The paste smells like a blend of native plants and herbs, an earthy and almost comforting aroma. As he works, he pauses ever so slightly over my face. There's a flicker of surprise in his eyes, a brief but unmistakable reaction to my fair complexion, so different from his own. But he quickly regains his composure and continues the task. The stranger finishes applying the paste just as the heavy footfalls of the creature grow dangerously close. He draws his spear, his body tensing, ready for the confrontation. His eyes flicker to mine, a silent message to stay quiet and still. Then, piercing through the cacophony, I hear it, a voice so familiar it sends shivers down my spine. "My little wren, are you there?" it calls, using a secret nickname only my father ever used. The voice is warm, comforting, yet utterly impossible. Every instinct in me wants me to rush towards the sound, towards the memory of safety and love that voice represents. I take a step forward, my heart aching with a mixture of hope and disbelief. But the stranger's hand grips my arm firmly, holding me back. His eyes, intense and fearful, meet mine. In them, I see a warning, a plea not to give in to the illusion. The voice outside, rich and familiar, continues to beckon. It's me, Big Eagle. Don't be afraid. The use of my father's nickname for himself sends a wave of nostalgia and confusion over me. It's as if though the past and the present are colliding in this surreal moment. The voice grows more insistent, pleading now. Willow, please come out. I've missed you, love. It's almost too much to bear, hearing those words from a man I believed was gone forever from my life. The voice outside shifts, no longer just my father's, but now intertwined with the soft tones of a woman and the playful chatter of a child. They speak in an unfamiliar language to me, their words flowing like a gentle stream, melodic and haunting. The voices, though soothing, carry an undercurrent of something sinister, an attempt to lure us from our hiding. My companion clenches his jaw, his hands tighten around the shaft of his spear. I can see the conflict raging within him, a desperate fight against the urge to respond to these ghostly calls. The creature's snout, a grotesque mix of scales and sinew, pushes through the narrow opening of our hiding place. Its breath is hot and fetid, filling the confined space with an oppressive stench. It sniffs around, probing closer and closer to where we crouch in silent terror. I hold my breath, trying to make myself as small as possible. The creature's snout comes mere centimeters from my face, its nostrils flaring as it searches for a scent. My heart pounds so loudly in my chest, I'm afraid it'll give us away. But the paste smeared all over me seems to mask my scent, disguising my foreign smell with the earthy tones of the Australian bush. The creature hesitates, sniffing the air with confusion. It's as if it senses our presence, but can't quite pinpoint where we are. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the creature withdraws its snout from the crevice. Its frustrated growls and heavy footsteps recede as it continues to search elsewhere. Time seems to stretch on endlessly. For a moment, neither of us move, still reeling from the close encounter. Every sound, every shift in the air sets my nerves on edge, but gradually the oppressive sense of danger begins to fade. The creature's growls and footsteps, once so menacingly close, are now distant echoes. Finally, after what feels like hours, the young man relaxes his posture slightly. His sharp gaze softens and he turns to me, nodding slightly. It's a silent signal that it might be safe to leave our hiding place. We emerge cautiously from behind the waterfall, stepping out into the cool, misty air. The sun rising is just a sliver on the horizon, casting a soft, golden glow on the rugged landscape. The immediate area is quiet, the only sound being the water cascading down the rocks. The stranger gestures for me to follow him, moving with a stealth and grace that speaks of his deep familiarity with this land. We tread lightly, every step measured and deliberate, alert for any sign of the creature. As we move away from the waterfall, the young man suddenly stops and crouches down. He examines the ground closely, tracing a set of tracks with his fingers. They're large and deep, unmistakably those of the creature. Taking a hesitant step forward, I clear my throat softly. "Thank you," I say, my voice barely above a whisper, mindful of the lingering danger. "You saved my life." I pause, waiting for any sign of acknowledgement, but he continues his examination, unfazed. I try again, a bit louder this time. "Can you tell me your name? Do you know what was that thing we just saw?" My questions hang in the air, unanswered. He looks up at me with a perplexed expression, his brow furrowing slightly. In a low, cautious tone, he mutters something in a language I don't recognize. The words are fluid, rich with inflections that are unfamiliar to my ears. Garnering nothing but a blank stare from me, he returns to the tracks. His eyes widen as he picks up a piece of tattered fabric from one of the creature's paw prints. It's a small scrap, but clearly part of a garment, frayed and stained with what looks like dried blood. He holds it up, examining it closely, his expression one of concern. Suddenly, he turns to me and becomes animated, speaking rapidly in his native tongue. His words are a torrent of sounds and syllables that dance around me, completely foreign and incomprehensible. He points emphatically at the scraps, then to the tracks, and finally towards the dense bushland. I watch him, trying to decipher his meaning through his gestures and the urgency in his voice. It's clear he is trying to convey something crucial, something about the creature and perhaps its recent activities. "I'm sorry, I don't understand," I say, my voice tinged with frustration. "Can you please just speak to me in English?" It doesn't even occur to me at the time that he might not know English. He stares at me, his expression hard to read. For a moment, he seems to be weighing his options, his gaze shifting from me to the wilderness around us. Then, without another word, he turns and storms off into the bushland. His departure is swift, a clear sign of his annoyance, or perhaps his need to act quickly. For a moment I'm stunned, left standing in the early morning light, the sound of the wilderness enveloping me. The sense of isolation is palpable, and the memory of the creature's terrifying presence is still fresh in my mind. Shaking off my hesitation, I start to follow him. My injuries protest with each step, but the danger of being alone in this environment, especially with that creature out there, overrides my discomfort. "Wait," I call out, my voice echoing slightly in the open space. Catching up to him, I try to keep pace, my breathing heavy from the exertion and pain. "We should stick together," I say, more to myself than to him, especially with that thing out there. He doesn't stop, but I notice he's not moving as fast as he could. It seems like he's consciously slowing down his pace, allowing me to follow close behind, despite my injured state. He continues forward, muttering something under his breath in his language. It's a stream of words I can't understand, but the tone suggests distress. We trek through the rugged wilderness, the landscape a blur of reds and greens through my increasingly hazy vision. The throbbing in my head, a dull ache at first, grows to an insistent, pulsating pain. It feels like a drumbeat, relentless and overpowering. My steps become unsteady, each movement sending waves of nausea and dizziness through me. As we navigate the dense underbrush, my vision starts to double, the world around me splitting and merging into a disorienting dance. I blink rapidly, trying to clear my sight, but it only seems to worsen. The edge of my vision darkens, the encroaching shadows narrowing my field of view. I can feel the heat of the sun on my back, the sweat trickling down my spine, but it's as if I'm moving through a thick fog. My ears ring, the sounds of the bush muted and distant. I try to focus on the young man leading the way, his figure now a nondescript silhouette in front of me. I want to call out, to tell him that something is wrong, but my tongue feels heavy, my throat dry. With each step, the pain in my head spikes, a sharp contrast to the numbness that starts to creep into my limbs. I stumble, my feet tangled in the underbrush, and my hand reaches out, grasping for support, but there's nothing to hold on to. My knees buckle and I feel myself falling. The ground rushes up to meet me, a collision that seems both imminent and surreal. In that moment, a wave of helplessness washes over me, a sense of impending doom. But the impact never comes. Instead, there's a sudden, jarring halt as strong arms catch me, preventing me from crashing to the earth. I barely register the sensation of being lifted, my body too heavy, too disconnected from my mind. The last thing I remember is the sensation of being carried, the steady rhythm of footsteps, a faint echo in the growing darkness of my mind. As I slowly regain consciousness, the world comes back into focus with a soft blur. The gentle sway of leaves above me creates a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. I'm lying on a bed of green foliage under a sprawling eucalyptus tree, its distinct, aromatic scent filling the air around me. I try to sit up, but a sharp pain in my head forces me back down. That's when I notice the stranger sitting beside me, his watchful eyes fixed on my face. He holds out a container crafted from the bark of a tree, filled with the clear, cool water. With his help, I manage to take a few sips, the water bringing a much-needed relief to my parched throat. He then gently examines my head, his fingers probing with a careful, practiced touch. There's a tenderness in his actions. He's collected various plants and herbs, some of which I recognize as native remedies. With skilled hands, he starts to apply a poultice to my head wound. The cool mixture stings at first, but soon a soothing sensation replaces the pain. Once he's done, he sits back down, giving me space. His gaze wanders to the horizon, lost in thoughts I can't begin to comprehend. I take the opportunity to observe him more closely. His face, etched with lines of experience, tells a story of a life lived in harmony with nature. His eyes, dark and deep, reflect a world that is both beautiful and brutal. Gathering my strength, I make another attempt to communicate with the stranger. "Thanks again. My name's Willow, by the way," I say, hand outstretched. His expression remains stoic, his eyes revealing nothing. "Do you understand me?" I ask tentatively, my voice weak but hopeful. He watches me, his face unreadable. He doesn't respond, and it becomes increasingly clear that he might not understand English. This realization strikes me as odd. Even the most isolated Aboriginal communities have some exposure to English. As I lie there, pondering our communication barrier, I observe him more closely. His attire, his tools, the way he interacts with the environment, it all seems different. Not just traditional, but ancient, untouched by the modern world. A thought begins to form in my mind, a possibility so incredible that it borders on the fantastical. Could he be from an uncontacted people? I sit up, contemplating the possibility, my mind racing. I've heard stories about the Pintupi Nine, the group of Indigenous Australians who walked out of the desert in 1984, having lived in isolation from the outside world. But that was nearly 40 years earlier, and the idea of stumbling upon an uncontacted tribe in Australia in 2023 seems almost as unbelievable as the monstrous creature we'd just encountered. Yet, as I watched him methodically tend to the surrounding area, arranging stones, checking the wind direction, and occasionally glancing at the sky, I can't help but wonder. He notices my scrutiny and meets my gaze. There's a brief moment where our eyes lock, a silent exchange. Humouring the possibility, I point to myself, using slow, deliberate gestures. "Willow," I repeat, tapping my chest. He watches, his expression thoughtful. Then, mimicking my action, he taps his own chest and says, "Jira." My companion has a name, and it's Jira. Ecstatic at the breakthrough, my heart leaps. "Jira," I repeat, a smile breaking through my pain and exhaustion. It's a small connection, but it feels monumental, like a bridge across the unfathomable chasm between us. But then, a grim thought crosses my mind, casting a shadow over my brief moment of joy. Here I am, a modern woman with all the germs and microbes of a world far removed from Jira's. The sudden realization hits me hard. I could be a walking, talking petri dish of pathogens to which he might have no immunity. Memories of historical accounts where explorers and settlers inadvertently introduced diseases to indigenous populations flash through my mind. The consequences were often catastrophic. A shiver runs down my spine at the thought of being responsible for such a tragedy. I rummage through my first aid kit. My fingers, still slightly unsteady from my recent ordeal, search for a face mask. Finding one, I quickly put it on, securing it firmly over my nose and mouth. I can't completely eliminate the risk, but I can minimize it. Jira watches me with a mix of curiosity and confusion. He doesn't understand the reason behind this strange new addition to my face, but he remains silent, his eyes following my every move. I reach back into my backpack, gingerly pulling out my notebook. It's a bit damp from our earlier plunge through the waterfall, but the contents are mostly intact. Flipping through the pages, I find what I'm looking for. Photos of me in Perth. I show Jira the pictures, pointing to the tall buildings, the crowded streets, and the images of me in various urban settings. I tap the photo and then point to myself, trying to convey that this is where I come from. Home, I say slowly. That's where I'm from. Jira leans in, his eyes scanning the images with a mix of wonder and perplexity. He touches the photo lightly, tracing the outlines of the skyscrapers and the unfamiliar faces in the pictures. He looks up at me, then back at the photo, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Encouraged by Jira's reaction, I flip to a blank page in my notebook. Taking out a pen, I demonstrate its use, drawing a simple outline of the terrain we're in. I then hand the pen to Jira, gesturing towards the notebook and then at the photos. I want him to draw where he's from, to share a part of his world as I've shared mine. Jira takes the pen, examining it with a curious gaze. He tentatively places the tip on the paper and starts to draw. His movements are cautious at first, but soon they become more fluid, revealing a natural talent for expression. A village emerges on the page. He adds several huts arranged in a circle and a larger central structure that seems to be a communal area. He adds a figure, presumably himself, depicted as walking away from the village. The figure is alone, separated from the other elements of the drawing, imparting a sense of solitude and departure. I'm no anthropologist, but through my schooling and cultural sensitivity training as a ranger, I've learned about various aspects of Aboriginal cultures. One concept that comes to mind is that of the walkabout, a rite of passage in which young Aboriginal men embark on a journey into the wilderness, living off the land for a period to transition into manhood and gain spiritual enlightenment. As I ponder over Jira's drawing, the eerie encounter with the creature still looms large in my thoughts. I decide to communicate this experience with Jira, hoping he might have some insight or knowledge about what we faced. I start sketching the creature as best as I can recall, the grotesque features, the scaly skin, the malevolent eyes. I try to capture every detail that's etched into my memory. My hand trembles slightly as I draw, the image stirring renewed terror. Finishing the sketch, I turn the notebook to show Jira. "Do you know what this is?" I ask. His reaction is immediate and intense. His eyes widen and he recoils slightly, a look of recognition and fear crossing his face. He begins speaking rapidly, his voice urgent. One word stands out, repeated several times with emphasis. Bunyip. Jira's hand shakes as he takes the notebook from me, his eyes locked onto the sketch of the bunyip. With a sense of urgency, he begins drawing a line from the monstrous figure to the village he had depicted earlier. The line he draws is jagged, almost erratic, as if to symbolize the chaotic and unpredictable nature of the bunyip. He taps the line repeatedly, his eyes meeting mine with a piercing intensity. It's clear to me now why he was in such a rush. He fears the bunyip is heading towards his village, or worse, that it might already be there. Jira and I sit in silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. The revelation of the bunyip, a creature of Aboriginal legend, now terrifyingly real, hangs heavy between us. The urgency in Jera's eyes tell me that we can't delay. His village might be in danger. As I test my strength, I find the sharp pains have dulled to a manageable ache. My head still throbs, but the world no longer spins uncontrollably. I nod to Jera, signalling that I am ready to move. He offers me a hand, pulling me to my feet. We set out at a steady pace, Jera leading the way. He moves with a quiet confidence, each step purposeful. I follow closely, relying on my ranger training to keep up. Our journey is mostly silent, the only sound being our footsteps in the distant calls of birds and insects. Every so often, Jera pauses to examine the ground or the brush, ensuring we are not walking into danger. His vigilance is both reassuring and a reminder of the perils we face. We travel throughout the day, the sun charting its relentless course across the sky. Our only respite comes in brief, stolen moments of rest under the shade of sparse trees or rocky outcrops. Each time we stop, it's for no more than a few minutes, just long enough to catch our breath and sip sparingly from our dwindling water supply. The terrain varies as we move, from flat, open plains to rocky ridges and shallow valleys. The landscape is harsh, but breathtaking in its raw beauty. As dusk approaches, the sky transforms into a canvas of deep oranges and purples, the sun dipping below the horizon. The beauty of the sunset is a contrast to the exhaustion that clings to us like a second skin. My body aches with every step. It's been over 24 hours since I've slept, the events of the day blurring into a relentless, adrenaline-fueled ordeal. My eyes sting from fatigue, my movement slower, less precise. I glance over at Jera. His endurance is remarkable, but the signs of fatigue are there, subtle but unmistakable. The slight droop in his shoulders, the brief moments where his pace slows, the faint lines of strain around his eyes, all indicators that he too is pushing his limits. I gesture to him, miming sleep with my hands clasped together and resting my cheek against them. "We should rest," I say, my voice a hoarse whisper in the growing twilight. His response is immediate and firm, a shake of the head, a determined look in his eyes. He's set on continuing, driven by the urgency to protect his village. I understand his concern, but I know too well the dangers of pushing our bodies beyond their limits. "We need to sleep, even for just a little while," I insist, hoping my tone gets my meaning across. "We'll be no good to anyone if we collapse from exhaustion." Jera hesitates, clearly torn between the need to press on and the reality of our physical limits. His eyes betray a moment of vulnerability, a silent acknowledgement of my words. Yet he nods curtly, signaling his decision to continue regardless. Navigating under the starlit sky, Jera often pauses, tilting his head upwards. In these moments, I notice him aligning our path with the Southern Cross, using the constellation as a guide through the dark. As the darkness deepens, our journey becomes increasingly perilous. The lack of light turns every shadow into a potential threat, every rustle in the bush a cause for alarm. I keep a close eye on him, aware that in this state, even a seasoned tracker like Jera is susceptible to the dangers of the wilderness. It happens suddenly. Jera steps onto a loose stone on a narrow ridge, his foot sliding out from under him. He stumbles, his arms flailing for balance, but fatigue has robbed him of his usual grace. For a heart-stopping moment, he teeters on the edge of a steep drop. Without thinking, I lunge forward, grabbing his arm and pulling him back with all my strength. The sudden motion sends a jolt of pain through my injured wrist, but I barely register it. We both tumble to the ground, a tangle of limbs just centimeters from the precipice. For a moment, we lie there, panting heavily, the realization of what almost happened settling in. Jera sits up slowly, his gaze lingering on the edge of the ridge. Then he turns to me. There's a newfound respect in his eyes, an acknowledgement of our mutual reliance. He nods slowly, conceding to the necessity of rest. We find a small, sheltered area nestled between two large boulders, providing some protection from the elements and any roaming wildlife. Jera sets to work immediately, gathering dry twigs and leaves while I use my lighter to start a fire. The flames catch quickly, casting a warm, reassuring glow in the encroaching darkness. As the fire crackles and pops, Jera reaches into his pouch and brings out something wrapped in leaves. He unwraps it carefully, revealing a small portion of smoked meat and some native berries. He hands me a portion with a nod. I humbly accept his offering. The food, though simple, tastes delicious to my empty stomach. In return, I open my backpack and take out some of my emergency rations, a couple of energy bars and a packet of dried fruits and nuts. I offer them to Jera, watching as he examines them with curiosity before tentatively tasting them. He seems pleasantly surprised by the flavours, nodding his approval. After we finish our meal, a comfortable silence settles between us, broken only by the crackling of the fire. I watch the flames dance, their warmth soothing my aching body. As I sit there, I'm struck by a deep sense of gratitude towards Jera for saving me from the bunyip. I feel a compelling need to express my thanks in a tangible way. I dig through my backpack, my fingers brushing past various items until they find what I'm looking for, my Swiss Army knife. Holding it out to Jera, I say, "I want you to have this." My voice is firm, underscored with sincerity, as a thank you for saving my life. I take a moment to demonstrate its various tools, the knife, the screwdriver, the tiny scissors, and the can opener. Jera looks at the knife, his eyes tracing its contours. He takes it, turning it over in his hands, examining its various functions. He seems to understand its value, not just as a tool, but as a gesture of gratitude and respect. In response, Jera reaches for something tied to his belt. It's his boomerang, its surface smooth and worn from use. The wood is dark, rich in colour, and adorned with intricate carvings that tell a story I can't decipher. He offers it to me with solemn dignity. I accept the weapon with a sense of awe and reverence, my fingers gently tracing the intricate carvings etched into its surface. "Thanks, mate," I say, my voice thick with emotion. "I promise to cherish this." Jera nods, a faint smile touching his lips, his eyes reflecting the fire's glow. Jera sits close to the fire, his posture rigid, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the flickering flames. As the night deepens, his eyelids droop occasionally, and his head nods forwards before he snaps back to alertness. I notice his struggle. Through a series of gestures, I suggest taking turns sleeping, ensuring one of us is always on the lookout. I tap my chest and then point to the surrounding darkness, indicating that I'll take the first watch while he rests. At first, Jera resists, but after a few more insistent gestures from me, he gives in. He arranges himself on the ground, using his pouch as a makeshift pillow. His eyes linger on me for a moment, an unspoken thanks, before he finally closes them. As I keep watch, I take out my notebook and begin jotting down the events of the day. I pause occasionally, glancing at Jera to ensure he's still sleeping peacefully, and then at the surrounding darkness, half expecting the nightmarish creature to reappear. I don't know when I fell asleep, but my exhaustion must have overtaken me. In the silence of the Outback night, with Jera resting beside me, I drift into a dream. It's vivid, filled with the sharp clarity of memories that have long been etched to my heart. I'm 15 again, back in Cape Range National Park, under the vast expanse of the starlit sky. The air is crisp, filled with the scent of eucalyptus and the distant sound of the ocean. Dad and I are sitting by the campfire, just like we've done countless times before. He's telling me about one of his adventures. It's during one of these stories that I find the courage to break the news to him. "Dad," I start hesitantly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Mum's getting remarried." The words hang in the air, heavy with the weight of change they carry. He doesn't react immediately, his expression unreadable. Then he sighs, a sound that seems to carry a weight of unspoken thoughts. "I see," he finally says. "I'm happy for her." His voice is steady, but I can hear the faintest trace of something else in it. Maybe sadness, maybe resignation. He looks at me, his eyes reflecting the flickering flames, a mix of emotions playing across his features. "I hope he makes her happy," he adds, his voice tinged with a bittersweet edge. His heart is so torn that it breaks mine. I rush in, the words tumbling out in a torrent. "I can't stand him. Mark, he's a fucking asshole." I struggle to find the right words to express how much I loathe my future stepfather, but they all fall short. He's not you," I finish lamely, feeling a profound sadness. "You know, Ren," he says, using his special nickname for me, "sometimes people come into our lives and we don't get to choose. What matters is how we respond to them." I feel a surge of frustration mixed with a desperate longing for an escape. "I could run away. It'll be just you and me. We can live out here, away from everything." He chuckles softly, a sound that seems both sad and fond. "You are my wild spirit," he says, "but life isn't about running away. It's about facing what comes and finding your path through it." He sees the tears brimming in my eyes, a mix of frustration and youthful defiance. "Hey, I got you something for your birthday," he says, gently changing the subject, reaching into his backpack. He pulls out the leather-bound notebook, the same one I've been carrying during my ordeal. "For all your adventures, big and small," he adds with a smile. I wipe away my tears and take the notebook, tracing my fingers over its cover. He looks at me, his eyes softening. "You know that I love you, right?" he asks. "That I'd do anything in my power to make sure you're not hurt." I lean into him, wrapping my arms around his sturdy frame. "Of course I know, Dad," I say, my voice muffled against his jacket. "I love you too." "You're gonna be alright, Willow," he says softly. "No matter what life throws your way, remember, you're stronger than you think." The dream shifts, the warmth of the campfire replaced by the chilling cold of dawn. I wake to find my father gone, his sleeping bag empty, his boots still by the fire. Panic grips me, a tight knot in my stomach. I call out for him, my voice breaking in the morning stillness, but there's no response. I scramble to my feet, my heart racing. The notebook falls from my lap, landing open on the ground. The memories of our last night together swirl in my mind, a mix of love and foreboding. The campsite is undisturbed, his belongings left as if he intended to return. But there's an eerie silence, a sense of absence that's palpable. I grab a flashlight and start searching the surrounding area, the beam of light cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. I call his name over and over, my voice growing hoarse. The landscape is unyielding, offering no clues, no sign of his passage. I stumble upon a small clearing, and there, in the dirt, are footprints. They are his, I'm sure of it. My heart leaps with a mixture of hope and dread. As I follow the tracks, the terrain becomes more rugged, the earth giving way to limestone. The footprints lead directly to a cliff face, the ground ending abruptly in a sheer drop to the ocean below. There, at the edge, the footprints come to an abrupt halt. No signs of return, no further path to follow. My breath catches in my throat, a silent sob trapped in the cage of my ribs. The implications hang in the air, heavy and unspoken.
The cold, grey light of dawn casts long shadows across the ground, shadows that seem to stretch into the void below. I inch closer, peering over the edge with a mix of fear and desperation, but there's nothing to see, just the endless expanse of water meeting sky, a horizon that offers no answers, only questions. A deep, hollow feeling settles in my chest, a void where hope used to reside. I fall to my knees, the damp earth clinging to my pajama pants. My father, my mentor and my guide, chose to walk away from everything, from me. Suddenly, amidst the oppressive silence, a familiar voice calls out from behind me, "Willow!" I whirl around, my heart leaping into my throat. There, against all logic, stands my dad. He looks the same, the early morning light casting familiar shadows across his face. Disbelief, relief, and skepticism war within me. "Dad?" My voice is a whisper, tinged with a hope I'm afraid to fully embrace. He steps forward, his presence undeniably real. "I'm here, little Wren," he says, his voice carrying the warmth I remember so well. I step forward, each movement filled with a mix of fear and longing. "How is this possible?" I ask, my voice trembling. He opens his arms, a gesture of reassurance and comfort. "I've always been here. You just had to find me." I step towards him, drawn by the familiarity and warmth of his presence. Yet, as I move closer, a sense of unease creeps into my heart. Something about his appearance, his aura, feels off. "What happened to you?" I ask, my voice laced with doubt. "You've grown strong, Willow," he smiles, but it's a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "But are you strong enough to face the truth?" "Dad, you're scaring me," I whisper, my heart pounding. His smile widens, but it's not the warm, comforting expression I remember. Instead, it twists into something mocking, a grin that sends shivers down my spine. Suddenly, he erupts into laughter, a sound so jarring and inhuman that it freezes me into place. The laughter echoes around us, bouncing off the cliffs and filling the air with a sinister resonance. As I watch in horror, my dad's form begins to shift, to contort in ways that defy reality. His skin ripples and bulges, his features distorting grotesquely. I take a step back, my breath caught in my throat. The man who was my father is transforming, his body expanding and twisting into a monstrous shape. The familiar features melt away, revealing the scaly, molted skin of the bunyip. Its eyes, glowing a deep, malevolent red, fix on me with a terrifying intensity. Desperation and fear grip me, but they also bring me to a lucid clarity. This isn't real. I'm having a nightmare. I need to wake up. Just as the ghoulish creature prepares to lunge at me, a primal, instinctive part of my mind screams at me to take drastic steps to jolt myself awake. I glance over the edge of the cliff, the drop seeming like an endless chasm into the abyss. It's a terrifying choice, but it's the only way I can think of to break free from this horrific dream. I take a deep breath. I step back, gathering every ounce of courage and resolve within me. Defiant glance at the monster, I sprint off the cliff's edge. I can feel the rush of air, the sensation of weightlessness as I fall off the cliff. It's a terrifying, exhilarating moment, a leap into the unknown. My stomach churns, my heart races, every sense heightened to an almost unbearable intensity. The water below seems to rush up to meet me, the vast expanse of ocean a blur of colour and motion. But before I can brace for impact, I'm jolted awake. It's a sudden, violent awakening, my body lurching upright as if pulled by unseen strings. My breath comes in ragged gasps, my heart pounding against my ribcage. I'm disoriented, the remnants of the nightmare clinging to me like a cold mist. It's early morning, the first light of dawn casting a soft glow on the surrounding landscape. The fire has died down to embers, its warmth a fading memory. I'm back in the Outback, the nightmare of the cliff and the monstrous bunyip fading into the surreal world of dreams. But a new panic sets in as I quickly realise that Jera is nowhere to be seen. His sleeping spot is empty, the ground still bearing the imprint of his body. My eyes dart around the campsite, searching for any sign of him, any clue to where he might have gone. His belongings are still here, just like my dad's were that morning when I discovered he was gone. My heart sinks and a wave of desolation washes over me. Did Jera, too, choose to walk away? Why would he leave without a word, especially after everything we've been through together? My mind races through possibilities, each more disheartening than the last. Did he sense some danger and go to investigate? Or did he simply decide that our paths no longer aligned, leaving me to face the wilderness alone? I stand up, my body stiff and sore from the restless sleep and the events of the past days. My first instinct is to call out for him, but I restrain myself, aware that any noise might attract unwanted attention, perhaps even from the bunyip itself. I start to pace around the campsite, scanning the area for any clues. There are tracks leading away. They're Jera's. I recognise the unique pattern of his footprints. They head off into the bushland, but there's no clear indication of why he left or where he might be going. But then, just as the sun fully breaks the horizon, casting long shadows on the red earth, I see a figure approaching. It's Jera, his stride confident, carrying something in his hand. A flood of relief washes over me. As he comes closer, I notice he's carrying a dead sand goanna, the monitor lizard's long, slender body limp in his grasp. In his other hand, he holds a collection of wild herbs, freshly gathered. Jera lays the items down near the remnants of our campfire. He meets my gaze briefly, a flicker of something akin to an apology in his eyes, before he gets to work. He carefully extracts the venom from the goanna, his movements precise and skilled. The venom, a potent neurotoxin, is something I've read about in my ranger training, but I've never seen it handled in person. With deliberate care, he mixes the venom with the herbs he gathered, grinding them together with a small, flat stone. The mixture becomes a thick, dark paste, its consistency perfect for his purpose. Jera looks up at me, his eyes communicating a silent warning of the mixture's lethal nature. Then, with a steady hand, he applies the paste to the tip of his spear, ensuring an even coating. I watch, captivated by the demonstration of a skill passed down through generations, a skill that has likely saved his life more than once. He then turns to the Swiss Army knife I had gifted him, applying the same mixture to its blade with deliberate care. Cautious about his actions, I hold up the boomerang he had given me, raising an inquiring eyebrow. "This too?" I ask. Jera nods in confirmation. He carefully applies a thin layer of the venom herb mixture along its edges, transforming the simple wooden tool into a deadly weapon. As Jera completes his meticulous preparation of our weapons, he suddenly gestures towards my notebook. I pick it up and hand it to him, along with the pen. He flips to a blank page and starts to sketch with a focused intensity. The lines he draws take shape, forming the image of the bunyip. He portrays it standing on its hind limbs, its menacing form dominating the page. Then, with precise strokes, Jera adds two smaller figures next to the creature, one holding a spear, the other with a boomerang. He points to a specific spot on the creature's underbelly in the drawing, circling it multiple times. It seems he's identified a vulnerability, a target for us to aim for in our battle against the creature. Jera says something in his language, his tone suggesting a question. Though I don't understand his words, his meaning is clear. He's asking if I comprehend the plan. I nod. meeting his gaze with a grim determination. "I understand," I reply. As we approach the vicinity of Jira's village, the terrain changes subtly. The bushland gives way to more open landscape. The village is nestled in a secluded valley, surrounded by high ridges that offer both protection and isolation. It's a hidden gem, an oasis of calm in the harsh Australian wilderness. We approach the village with a growing sense of dread, the signs of devastation becoming increasingly apparent. The once vibrant community, as depicted in Jira's drawing, is now a scene of utter desolation. The air is thick with the acrid scent of smoke and something else, something far more sinister. Entering the perimeter of the village, the full extent of the tragedy unfolds before us. The huts are reduced to smouldering ruins, the communal areas are destroyed, their sacred grounds desecrated. The most disturbing sight, however, is the bodies. The men of the village, warriors and hunters, lie scattered across the landscape. Their final moments seem to tell a story of a fierce, desperate battle against an unimaginable foe. The marks on their bodies, deep gashes and wounds, match the fearsome characteristics of the bunyip we encountered. Jira moves through the village with a hollow, haunted look in his eyes. Each body he passes, he stops, his hand gently closing their eyes in a final act of respect and farewell. His grief is palpable, a silent scream of pain and loss that echoes through the empty village. I stand there, feeling utterly hopeless, my heart heavy with sorrow for Jira and his people. I want to offer comfort, but words seem meaningless in the face of such devastation. Jira's steps grow heavier, laden with an unspeakable pain. He finally falls to his knees amidst the ruins, his entire frame shaking with silent sobs. It's a heart-wrenching sight, a proud and strong man brought to the brink by the loss of everything he held dear. His anguished prayers, spoken in his native tongue, fill the air, a haunting melody of sorrow and despair. His grief is a tangible force, a raw, open wound that transcends language and culture. I recall the day I lost my dad, the confusion and heartache that followed. But Jira's loss is on a scale I can't even begin to comprehend. He's not just mourning a single person, he's grieving for his entire world, a community and way of life that has been torn away from him in the most brutal manner. Gently, I kneel beside him, offering my presence as a silent source of support. I place a tentative hand on his shoulder, unsure if my touch is welcome, but feeling the need to bridge the gap of isolation that surrounds him. I wrap my arms around him in a comforting embrace. He leans into me, his cries muffled against my shoulder. "I'm here for you, Jira," I whisper softly, my voice barely above the whisper of the wind through the charred remains of his home. "You're not alone in all this." The words feel inadequate, but they are all I have to offer in the face of such overwhelming sorrow. Jira's sobs subside abruptly and his attention shifts to something in the distance. Following his gaze, I notice a series of footprints amidst the devastated village. Unlike the chaotic scuffles and the heavy tracks from the battle, these are smaller, more measured, possibly those of women and children. Jira stands up, his body language changing from one of defeat to determination. He gestures for me to follow and starts tracking the footprints with a renewed sense of purpose. As we follow the trail, it becomes clear that these are not random or aimless tracks. They are purposeful, leading away from the carnage, deeper into the wilderness. The possibility that some of his people might have escaped the bunyip's wrath instills a new urgency in our steps. Jira and I venture deeper into the wilderness, the terrain becoming increasingly treacherous and unfamiliar. The tracks lead us through dense bushland, across rocky gorges, and along the banks of a serpentine river. The sun is high, casting sharp shadows that play tricks on our eyes, but we press on, driven by the hope of finding survivors. As the hours pass, a heavy silence settles over the land. It's as if nature itself is holding its breath, aware of the dark presence lurking nearby. The tracks lead us to the entrance of a vast cave network. hidden beneath an overhang of twisted roots and ancient stone. The mouth of the cave is wide and dark, an abyss that swallows the morning sunlight. Stalagmites and stalactites jut out of the jagged teeth, giving the cave entrance the appearance of a massive, petrified beast. Jira pauses at the entrance, his eyes scanning the shadows within. There's an unspoken understanding between us that we might be walking into the very heart of danger. He places a reassuring hand on my shoulder, his gaze firm and resolute. Taking a deep breath, we both smear a final layer of the ochre paste over our faces to conceal our scent. Jira leads the way into the cave, his steps silent and cautious. I follow, every sense heightened, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside the cave, the atmosphere changes dramatically, as if stepping through a threshold into another realm. The air is cooler, the light dim, filtered through the cracks and crevices in the rocky ceiling. The walls are adorned with ancient handprints that glow softly, emitting a spectral light that seems to pulse with a life of its own. I'm reminded of the Aboriginal concept of dreamtime, where the past, present, and future converge. The further we venture, the more the cave transforms. Stalactites hang from the ceiling like chandeliers. The haunting sound of a didgeridoo resonates through the cave, its deep, rhythmic drone vibrating in the air around us. The melody is both mournful and soothing. We follow the haunting sound of the didgeridoo, its resonance guiding us deeper into the cave. The path narrows, winding through towering stalagmites that rise from the ground like silent sentinels. The melody grows louder, its rhythmic pulse echoing off the cave walls. We turn a corner, and the cave opens into a large chamber, bathed in soft, otherworldly light. The source of the light is a natural skylight, a gap in the rock through which the sun streams in, casting a warm glow over the space. In the chamber, illuminated by the sun's gentle light, we find them, the survivors of Jira's village. Women, children, and a few elderly members of the tribe huddle together, their eyes wide. They're a small group, a mere fraction of the village's original population, but at least they're alive. The didgeridoo player, an elder with a weathered face and wise eyes, sits cross-legged near the group. As we enter, he pauses, his gaze shifting to us. There's a moment of tension, a silent assessment, before recognition dawns in his eyes. Jira rushes forward, his voice breaking as he calls out in his native tongue. The survivors respond with a mixture of shock and joy, their initial fear giving way to tearful reunions. Mothers clutch their children closer, tears streaming down their faces, while the elderly reach out to touch Jira, as if to assure themselves that he's real. I stand back, watching the emotional reunion, feeling both an outsider and a witness to something profoundly emotional. The children, curious and resilient despite the horrors they've faced, begin to inch closer to me, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and caution. A young girl, no more than 5 or 6, bravely steps forward and offers me a shy smile. I kneel down and return her smile, touched by her gesture of friendship. "Hey there, sweetie," I say. She reaches out, her small fingers tentatively touching my curly blonde hair, mirroring her own. Her eyes widen in wonder, as if she's found a connection between us, a common thread in an otherwise unfamiliar world. I laugh softly, encouraged by her curiosity. "It's just like yours, isn't it?" I say gently. The reunion, though heartwarming, is tragically short-lived. Just as the atmosphere begins to settle into one of cautious relief, a chilling sound pierces the air, echoing ominously throughout the cave. It's a deep, guttural growl, a sound so menacing and primal that it instantly sends a wave of terror through the chamber. The survivors freeze, their expressions morphing into ones of pure fear. The children huddle closer to their mothers, their small faces etched with terror. Jira's head snaps up, his eyes narrowing as he listens intently. The grim look on his face tells me all I need to know. The bunyip is close, perhaps closer than we dared to think. The sound reverberates through the cave, a relentless echo that seems to come from every direction, disorienting and confusing. We quickly begin organising the survivors, directing them towards a narrow passageway at the back of the chamber. It's a tight squeeze, but it offers the only viable escape route. The bunyip's growls grow louder, more insistent. Its presence is like a tangible shadow, creeping closer with each passing second. The air in the cave becomes thick with tension, the fear almost palpable. Jira takes the lead, guiding the survivors through the passageway with quiet urgency. I follow at the rear, ensuring that no one is left behind. We move as quickly as we can, but the passage is narrow and winding, forcing us to proceed in single file. The walls close in around us, the air thick and heavy. The only sound is the shuffling of feet and the occasional whimper of fear from the children. As we squirm our way through the confining passage, the sound of the bunyip's growls intensifies, a constant, unnerving presence that seems to vibrate through the very walls of this cave. Its growls, low and resonant, echo around us, creating a disorienting cacophony of sound. The realization hits me with a chilling clarity. The bunyip is using a form of echolocation, its growls bouncing off the walls and guiding it toward our location. Our group, huddled together and moving in mass, is like a beacon, reflecting the sound waves back to the creature. Jira and I exchange glances. We both understand that we need to disperse the group to break the single mass that the bunyip's sounds are bouncing off of. Jira communicates this to the survivors in hushed, urgent tones. We reach a wider chamber within the cave, a natural crossroad with two tunnels leading in different directions. Jira quickly assesses the situation and instructs the survivors to head down one tunnel, speaking with a quiet authority that spurs them into action. He then turns to me, his expression resolute. He points down the tunnel the survivors are taking, signalling for me to follow them. I nod in understanding, ready to follow the survivors to ensure their safety, but as I turn to leave, I notice Jira isn't joining us. Instead, he heads down the other tunnel, banging his spear loudly against the walls. The understanding of what he's doing hits me instantly. He's acting as a decoy, drawing the bunyip's attention away from the group to give them a chance to escape. I hesitate for a moment, torn between the instinct to survive and the knowledge that Jira is knowingly walking into grave danger. But as he disappears into the darkness of the tunnel, I can't bring myself to leave him behind. After everything we've endured together, the idea of abandoning him to face the bunyip alone is unthinkable. I quickly turn back, following Jira's path. As I catch up to him, he whirls around, his expression one of frustration. He shakes his head, gesturing emphatically for me to go with the others, but I stand firm, meeting his gaze. "I'm not leaving you," I say, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "We face this together." Jira starts to protest, but he sees the resolve in my eyes. He reluctantly nods, understanding that I won't be swayed. The path twists and turns, leading us deeper into the heart of the cave. As we move, the ceiling gradually rises, opening into a larger chamber with high, vaulted ceilings. Stalagmites jut out of the ground, creating a natural labyrinth. The growls of the bunyip grow closer, more frenzied. It's as if the creature is closing in on us from all sides, its presence felt but not yet seen. The anticipation is almost as terrifying as the creature itself, a life or death game of cat and mouse. As we move forward, the air in the cave grows colder, a chill that seems to seep into my bones. Jira and I exchange tense glances, our hands gripping our weapons tightly, ready for the confrontation we know is coming. Suddenly, without warning, the ground in front of us explodes in a shower of rock and dust. The bunyip bursts forth from the earth. Its mottled green skin glistens in the faint light, and its malevolent red eyes fixate on us with a chilling intensity. The creature is larger and more terrifying than I remember, its presence dominating the chamber. The bunyip circles us, its movements deceptively agile for its size. It's toying with us, enjoying the game of predator and prey. Jira and I, despite our determination, are painfully aware of our disadvantage. We're fighting a creature of legend, a being that embodies the very essence of the wilderness's unforgiving nature. We dash through the maze of stalagmites, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. Our strategy is simple yet fraught with risk. Keep moving, stay unpredictable, and look for an opening to strike. The stalagmites provide temporary cover, but they also hinder our movement, forcing us to weave and dodge through the tight spaces. I glance back, catching a glimpse of the bunyip closing in. Its massive body scrapes against the stone, its claws leaving deep gashes in the earth. We take a sharp turn, hoping to lose the creature in the twisted pathways, but as we round a bend, the bunyip appears before us, blocking our path. Jira lunges forward, his spear aimed at the creature's underbelly, the spot he had marked on his drawing. But the creature dodges Jira's thrust, its movements eerily agile. It counters with a swipe of its massive claw, narrowly missing Jira, who jumps out of the way at the last second. I rush forward, swinging the boomerang gifted to me with all my might. The creature turns its attention to me, its eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. I strike, the boomerang connecting with a sickening thud against its thick hide, but it's like hitting a wall of stone. The creature barely flinches. The bunyip launches at me, its massive jaws open wide, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. I roll to the side, narrowly avoiding its bite. The creature's tail whips around, catching me off guard and sending me sprawling to the ground. Jira, seeing me in danger, rushes to my aid. He swings his spear with precision. The bunyip, sensing the threat, pivots swiftly, disarming Jira with a powerful flick of its paw. The spear clatters to the ground, just out of his reach. The creature turns its full wrath on Jira, pinning him to the ground with its massive form. In a desperate move, Jira reaches for the Swiss Army knife I gave him. With all his strength, he plunges the knife into the creature's side. The bunyip recoils with a deafening roar, releasing Jira from its grasp. Dark blood oozes from the wound, a clear sign that Jira's attack has found its mark. But it's not enough. The creature, though wounded, is still a formidable force, its eyes burning with rage. Holding the boomerang in my hands, I feel its weight and balance in my hands. It's nothing like the toy boomerangs I've thrown before. This is a weapon honed for survival. The bunyip doesn't notice me regaining my footing. My eyes dart around, desperately seeking an advantage. Then I see it. A massive, jagged stalactite hanging precariously above where the bunyip stands. It's a long shot, but it's all we have. In that moment, time seems to slow down. I can hear my heart pounding in my ears, the sound of my breath ragged and quick. I think of my father, of the lessons he taught me about facing fear head on. Channeling every ounce of strength and focus I possess, I hurl the boomerang with all my might. The boomerang cuts through the air, whistling as it arcs towards its target. My heart races as it nears the target, the moment stretching out, each second a lifetime. With a resounding crack, the boomerang strikes the stalactite. The impact sends a shudder through the cavern, a vibration that resonates through the very bones of the earth. The stone, already teetering on the edge of stability, begins to break free from the ceiling. The bunyip, sensing the danger, looks up just as the massive formation detaches, plummeting towards it with the force of gravity. There's no time for it to react, no time to escape. The stalactite crashes down upon the creature with a thunderous roar, engulfing it in a cloud of dust and debris. The jagged shards of stone pierce through the bunyip's tough, scaly skin. The creature lets out an earth-shattering roar, a sound filled with pain and fury. It writhes violently, its massive body struggling under the weight of the stone protruding from it, exposing its soft underbelly in a desperate attempt to free itself. Jira, seizing the moment, retrieves his spear from where it had fallen. He sets it in a spear thrower, a simple but effective tool that amplifies the force and distance of his throw. In a fluid, almost poetic motion, Jera draws back his arm and launches the spear. The spear flies through the air with deadly accuracy, its trajectory unerring. The silence of the cavern is pierced by the sound of the projectile cutting through the air, a whistle that seems to reverberate with the weight of the moment. The spear strikes true, burying itself deep into the bunyip's heart. The bunyip lets out a final, ear-splitting roar of pain and fury, its body convulsing as the life drains from it. For a few tense moments, the creature thrashes wildly, but each movement grows weaker. Dark, viscous blood pools around it, seeping into the earth. The bunyip's convulsions slowly subside, its massive form collapsing under the weight of its injuries. In a haunting transformation, the monster's grotesque visage morphs, revealing a face I know all too well. My father's. He looks at me with eyes filled with sorrow and pain, his voice echoing through the cavern. "Willow, my little wren, help me," he pleads, his voice a perfect imitation of my dad's. The illusion is so convincing, so heartbreakingly real, that for a moment I'm frozen, my heart torn between reality and the desperate longing to see my father again. Tears well up in my eyes, a mix of grief and anger. This creature, this abomination, dares to use my father's voice to prey on my deepest sorrows and fears. "You're not him," I say. "He's gone. You can't use his memory against me." The creature, sensing my wavering, continues in my father's voice. "Willow, it's me. I'm here. I've always been here for you." "Dad," I say, my voice trembling but resolute. "You left me. You chose to leave, and I've accepted that you're gone forever. You killed yourself, and nothing can change that." Jera, sensing my pain and seeing through the bunyip's deceit, steps forward with a resolute expression. He pulls out his spear from the creature's chest and, without hesitation, plunges it into its throat. As the spear pierces its throat, the bunyip's illusion shatters. The image of my father fades away, leaving behind the true form of the creature, a monstrous amalgamation of nightmares. Its body shudders violently before finally going still, the light fading from its malevolent red eyes. The cavern falls silent, save for the echoes of our laboured breaths and the distant drip of water from the stalactites. I stand there, breathing heavily, my emotions a tumultuous storm. Yet there is a sense of closure, a finality that brings with it a bitter form of peace. Jera places a comforting hand on my shoulder, his touch grinding me in the present. He looks into my eyes, his own reflecting a deep understanding of loss and the resilience required to overcome it. Jera and I make our way back towards the survivors. The handprints on the walls seem to guide us, their ancient glow a comforting presence in the dim light. As we approach the chamber where we had left the survivors, the sound of their anxious murmurs reaches our ears. The moment we step in, all eyes turn to us. Jera speaks to his people in a calm, steady voice, explaining what transpired. I watch as a collective sense of relief washes over them. We lead the survivors out of the cave, their faces reflecting a mix of exhaustion, relief, and lingering fear. Emerging from the cavern's mouth, we are greeted by the blinding light of day. The sun, high in the sky, bathes us in its warm glow, a welcome reprieve from the cold shadows of the cave. We set up a temporary camp near the cave entrance, using the remains of our supplies to provide some comfort. Jera, with his intimate knowledge of the land, gathers additional resources, ensuring that everyone is hydrated and fed. Then, in the late afternoon, a distant sound catches my attention. It's faint, barely audible over the wind, but unmistakable. The chop of helicopter blades. My heart leaps with hope. I shield my eyes with my hand, searching the sky. There, on the horizon, a speck appears, growing larger as it approaches. It's a search and rescue helicopter, its rotors slicing through the air with a steady rhythm. Relief washes over me, a wave of emotions that's hard to contain. As the helicopter draws closer, its presence sends a wave of panic through the survivors. They huddle closer together, their eyes wide with fear. This modern machine, so alien to their isolated existence, seems to them like another monster, perhaps more terrifying than the one we've just defeated. "It's okay," I say softly, speaking more with my eyes than my words. "They're here to help." Jera, sensing their unease, speaks to them in his native tongue, his tone gentle yet firm. Realizing that the helicopter might not easily spot us amidst the rugged terrain, I rummage through my backpack for a signal mirror. Finding it, I step into the clearing, angling the mirror towards the sun. The reflection catches the light, sending a bright, flashing signal towards the helicopter. The helicopter banks slightly, its course adjusting as it homes in on our location. It hovers above us, the downdraft from its rotors sending dust swirling around our makeshift camp. In the days and weeks following the dramatic rescue, the world I knew and the world Jera and his people knew collided in a whirlwind of change, discovery, and inevitable challenges. The survivors, having lived in isolation, were suddenly thrust into a reality far removed from their only life they had ever known. The bright lights, the noise, the constant barrage of new faces and languages. It was overwhelming, to say the least. For Jera and his people, every aspect of modern life was a novel, often intimidating experience. The government and various cultural preservation organizations stepped in, offering support and resources to facilitate their integration. Researchers worked closely with Jera and his people to learn more about their culture and background. It was later discovered that this group belongs to a previously unknown Aboriginal clan, which call themselves the Kalani. Jera, who had shown such strength and resilience in the face of the bunyip, now found himself in a position he could never have prepared for. Despite the overwhelming challenges, Jera faced this new world with the same bravery he had shown in the wilderness. He took charge, helping his people to navigate the complexities of this new life with a quiet dignity. I did everything in my power to bridge the gap between his world and ours. I worked with the support teams. I spent hours with Jera and the others, listening to their concerns, their fears, and their hopes. In the aftermath of the incident, Karijini National Park became the centre of a highly clandestine operation. A task force from the Australian Defence Force was deployed, and the park was promptly locked down. Their mission was shrouded in secrecy, and the park remained off-limits to the public for an extended period. During this time, I was subjected to a series of extensive interviews. The authorities were particularly interested in every detail of my encounter with the bunyip, how Jera and I managed to survive, and ultimately how we defeated it. I wasn't privy to the details of the operation or what they discovered in the depths of the park. There were whispers and rumours, of course, talk of strange findings, mysterious artefacts, and entities other than the bunyip, but nothing was confirmed publicly. Eventually, the park was deemed safe and the restrictions were lifted. Returning to my duties as a park ranger after the events that transpired is like stepping into a familiar painting that has had its colours subtly altered. There is an unspoken understanding among the rangers. We tread more carefully, speak more softly, and listen more intently to the whispers of the Outback. There's a respect, a reverence almost, for what may still lie hidden in its depths. I just want to thank Page Turner 627 for allowing me to narrate this series. If you liked what you heard here, head over to the author's page and show them some love, or leave a comment in the comments below as a shout out to the author. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, and as always, stay tuned for one more nightmare.